Very welcome.
Thank you. Maureen, she was here in Belfast.
Very well. Would you join the conversation?
Okay. My only way.
Do you think you have an opportunity?
Is it all?
Should be. At some point, I'll talk to you a little bit. I think that there's a colloquial if you're in the sometime,
Okay.
but
Okay.
don't get a chance to do it today.
The only thing is there's a long story program. A couple of interviews, but I think they
Okay.
follow the
Okay.
difference.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's just had some. Last night we were both exhausted. That's good exercise. I've been in assembly class for this, you have no comments because then you'll look a bit like say that sometimes you may catch them and get it. So, see that. People. Yeah, it's definitely a little harder.
Hey, David. Okay. That's excellent.
Thank you.
Service to the I was actually because it is actually. And those crystals too. It's so hard to catch up. Still don't. Yeah, well, I could think give me good times and time to do it. I go every time I'm taking a week off. I'd took 2 weeks off. I was 2 weeks off. I was looking at your brain. I was talking earlier to talk to him. Doesn't really job, doesn't really lend yourself to some program thing with the people. It was like 3 days after she was born. I have to make a call to her because she's met at the beer off. She should stick to it. After the I was glad to come back. Also, when the conversations you have about breast speak to somebody about something else.
On behalf of Mindfulness Ireland, I would just like to say thanks very much for coming. And also like to say turn off your mobiles. If you have a mobile, please turn off your mobile. And here's Ty. The other thing to say is there's a guest book that you can sign outside, and we're going to go straight from here to the walking meditation, just straight out the main door, down the front steps, and I'm going to hand you over to Connell.
Good morning, everyone. I have the great privilege of welcoming you here on behalf of John McAllister and Anna Lowe, who isn't with us today but is represented. We were asked some months ago to sponsor this event, to provide this room so as this encounter could happen. And I must say, it's been one of the most exciting opportunities I think any of us have had to be able to transform this space into a place of meditation, into a place of reflection, into a place where we can begin to explore the true meaning of concepts that we still struggle and grapple with at a regional and national level in these islands. Concepts like reconciliation and the concept of true peace. We wouldn't be here, of course, without the support of Mindfulness Ireland, and can I just thank everyone for having had the foresight to bring us here and to create the opportunity for this event. And so it is a very great privilege to welcome the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh and his monastics from the Plum Village Meditation Practice Centre in France. I understand that this is the end of a week-long visit to Ireland, and I hope it ends on as positive a note as I understand from your friends and colleagues the rest of your visit has been. It is wonderful to be in the presence of living history. I don't know anyone else who knew Martin Luther King, who met Robert Kennedy, who had the opportunity to engage Secretary of State McNamara, who knew people like Fulbright, a name that resonates opportunity to our young scholars, and yet was an individual who Thai had the opportunity to engage with at a very formative period in his life during a terrible war in Vietnam, a war that I understand exiled you from your own homeland for a period of time, and during which you championed nonviolence, a value which is exceptionally important to me personally and to the party I represent in this assembly. It is also very special to us to have amongst us people who have been nominated for great prizes internationally, and we cherish the fact that our own peacemakers were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and to be amongst another nominee makes it important for us as Northern Irish politicians to be amongst someone who was nominated by Martin Luther King. For someone of my generation and someone of my tradition is a tremendous experience. But of course we're here today to hear from a master and to reflect on his words and on his teachings, and to be able, as I said in the beginning of my remarks, to be able to explore concepts like peace and reconciliation, to do so in a non-threatening way, but I hope in a deeply challenging way, in a way that will challenge us personally to think about ourselves, but also to think about this society, this region, our islands, and the type of future that I think we all understand must be possible for us to strive to. I've been given a lovely note, a biographical note, that tells me about the way you came to encounter those men who played an important part in our history in the United States, and why you encountered them, because Vietnam was descending into war, and how you felt it was your duty to advocate in the United States at that time in the mid-1960s against a war, and to let democracy and dialogue reign, to let peaceful interaction come through. But enough of the history. What I would really like to do is ask you all in joining me in welcoming Thai, and to ask him to share with us some reflections and some thoughts that will hopefully inspire us and guide us in our work as legislators, as leaders in society, as private citizens, and as Irish and British people, most of whom I suspect are deeply proud of this little region we call home. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your welcome. Distinguished members of the House, distinguished guests and friends, I'm sure that all of you agree with me that we need a spiritual dimension in our daily life in order to be able to overcome difficulties and meet challenges. Whether we are political activists or peace activists, business leaders, school teachers, health professionals, or police officers. We need a spiritual dimension in our life. And I have offered retreats of mindfulness to members of parliament, to business leaders, to school teachers, to health professionals. And we have found out that this practice of mindfulness can help people in the attempt to restore themselves, how to get the nourishment and healing that they need in order to continue. And I would like to share some of our experiences with you today. We need a spiritual practice in order to help us to take care of our body, of our feelings, and of our perceptions, emotions, so that we can respond with clarity and compassion and loving kindness. When we breathe in mindfully, when we focus our attention on our in-breath, on our breath, we can release the past, the future, our projects, and come in touch with our body again. And become freer just by one in-breath and out-breath made in mindfulness. When I bring my mind back to my body just by breathing in mindfully, suddenly I find new possibilities arise. And I feel that I have more freedom. There are many ways to respond to the same challenge. The practice of mindful breathing can help me connect to my body, help me to recognize, to remember that I have a body, which is a wonder. If we spend too much time with our computer, we may forget that we have a body. And we get alienated from our body, and that will be the cause of sickness and stress and so on. So it's very important to from time to time to go back to ourselves and remember that we have a body. And if we can connect with our body, we can connect with the earth, Mother Earth, and connect with all the wonders of life that are refreshing and healing in us and around us. It's very important. It is a very simple practice, but it can help tremendously. When I go back to my body, I might notice that there is stress, there is tension and pain in my body. I may have allowed tension and pain to be accumulated a lot in my body. So when I go back to my body by the way of mindful breathing or mindful walking, I feel I need to help my body to release the tension. So by breathing out, smiling, I can allow the tension in my body to be released. And that I can do while I am in my office, or I sit in my car, or at any time of the day. I do not have to put aside some time for my spiritual practice. This kind of practice can be taken at any time of the day, whether you are brushing your teeth, or you are washing your dishes, or you are driving your car. To be mindful of what is going on, to be mindful of your in-breath and out-breath is always possible. To release the tension in my body, I can do it several times a day. Many of our brothers and sisters in the community, they program a bell of mindfulness in their computer, and every quarter, an hour, they hear the bell of mindfulness, they stop working, stop thinking, and begin to breathe in and out, and release the tension and connect with their body and smile to the wonders of life that are available in the here and the now. In this practice, we know that the kingdom of God is not something in the future elsewhere, but it is right in the here and the now. When I get in touch with a flower deeply, I know the flower belongs to the kingdom of God. And if I am in touch with the flower deeply, I am in touch with the kingdom of God. And in this practice, we notice that the kingdom is now or never. And we know that our body also belongs to the kingdom of God. And that is why breathing in, breathing out mindfully, we come home to the present moment, which is a place where life is available, because the past is already gone and the future is not yet there. Only the present moment has life and possess and contain all the wonders of life. That is why my practice of mindful breathing or mindful walking is to bring me home to the here and the now, so that I can be in touch with those events, those things that are healing, nourishing, that belong to the kingdom of God. And it is possible, I know that it is possible to live happily right in the here and the now. I do not have to wait until the future in order to start living. So generating the feeling of joy, generating the feeling of happiness is possible with the practice of mindful breathing and mindful walking. Many members of the Congress in America, they know the practice of mindful walking and breathing. We have offered 2 retreats of mindfulness in Capitol Hill. And there are those who say that from their office to the place where they cast their vote, they always practice walking, meditation, mindful of every step, enjoy every step, and allow their mind to stop thinking completely. And this can survive the hectic life by such practice, mindful breathing, mindful walking. We need a little bit of training in order to get used to the practice, and we can release the tension, get in touch with the wonders of life, getting the nourishment and healing at any time, thanks to this simple practice. And also, when we go home to ourselves, we have the opportunity to notice that there may be the painful feeling or a painful emotion. And the practice of mindful breathing, mindful walking can help us to recognize the pain, the sorrow, the fear, the anger in us. And help us to recognize it, help us to embrace it tenderly in order to bring a relief, to calm it down. It's like our body. When we are with our body, we can release the tension in our body and calm our body down. There is more peace in our body after a few minutes of practice. So the same thing is true with our painful feeling or our strong emotion. If we know how to generate the energy of mindfulness and peace by breathing mindfully, walking mindfully, we have that energy in order to recognize and embrace our pain, our sorrow, our fear, our anger, and get a relief after a few minutes. Most people in our society do not like to go back to themselves, because they are afraid that when they go back to themselves, they will have to encounter the block of pain and sorrow and fear and anger in them. Is not pleasant. And that is why most of us try to run away from ourselves, from our own suffering. Or we may like to cover up the suffering inside by consuming. We consume television, conversation, books, novels, musics, It's not because we like those very much, but because we cannot bear. We do not know how to handle the suffering inside. That is why we need those items of consumption provided by the market. So this practice offers us another alternative. If you know how to breathe in mindfully or to walk mindfully, you may generate an energy of mindfulness and peace. And with that, you can go home to yourself without fear. And you have the capacity to recognize the pain, the sorrow, the fear, the anger, and embrace it tenderly. And after a few minutes of practice, you can get a relief. And there is more peace, more capacity to be in touch with the wonders of life that are available within and around us. And then getting in touch with the suffering inside is a very important practice. There is suffering inside of every one of us. And that suffering inside of us may reflect the suffering of our own parents, our own ancestors. Our parents, our ancestors may have suffered a lot, but because many of them did not know how to handle, to transform, that is why they have transmitted to us their own suffering. And that is why sometimes we suffer and we don't know why we suffer like that. So it's very important to get in touch with suffering and to embrace it and to listen to it, to have a deep look into the nature of suffering in order to find out the cause, the roots of our own suffering. And our suffering also somehow reflects the suffering of the world. And that is why to understand our own suffering help us to understand the suffering of the other people much more easily. The other people in the other tradition of politics, religion, and so on. So understanding our own suffering is very, very important. And when we have the capacity to recognize, to go back to our suffering, recognize it, embrace it tenderly, we have a chance to understand our own suffering. And from that understanding of suffering arises compassion. The energy of compassion born from understanding suffering has the power to heal, to transform. And we feel much better after having produced the energy of compassion in us. And when we are lighter, when we suffer less, and we look at the other person or the other group of person, we can easily identify the suffering. We may find out that their suffering is not very different from our own suffering. And we have not understood their suffering because we have not understood our own suffering. That is why, having understood our own suffering, we can begin to understand their suffering. And suddenly we have the capacity to look at them with the eyes of compassion, and we don't suffer anymore. We do not have anymore that intention to punish. Instead, we want to do something, to say something in order to help them suffer less. It means that we have the energy of compassion inside of us. We suffer less. And when we get in touch with the other person or the other group of people, that compassion helps us to understand the suffering inside of that person or that group of people. And suddenly we have the capacity to look at them with the eyes of compassion. When they see us looking like that, they feel wonderful. They feel different. They suffer less. And when we look at them with that kind of compassion, we don't suffer anymore. Instead, we want to do something to say something in order to help that person suffer less. And even the person we consider to be our former enemy now. And joy, happiness is born from understanding and compassion. True happiness is not really made by fame, power, wealth, and sex. Because these objects of craving can make a person suffer very deeply. But if we know how to generate the energy of understanding and compassion in us, happiness becomes possible. A person who does not have compassion and love can never relate to another living being. He or she is completely cut off. And that is why we have to learn how to generate the energy of compassion. And the way is to get in touch with suffering and look deeply into the nature of suffering and understand suffering, the roots, the cause of suffering. And first of all, the suffering in us. When we have understood the suffering in us, it will be much easier to understand the suffering of the other person. And when we see the suffering of the other person, we are not angry anymore. We do not blame. We do not want to punish anymore. Instead, we want to do something to help. And now we have the capacity to use the kind of speech that is called kind, gentle, loving speech. We can say something like this: my dear one, I know that you have suffered a lot during the last many years. We can tell our partner, our husband, our wife, our son, our daughter. We may tell our colleague. We may tell the people on the other side. And using that kind of speech called loving speech, once compassion is already a reality in us. Dear one, we know that you have suffered a lot in the past. I have not been able to help you to suffer less. Instead, I have made the situation worse. It's not my intention to make you suffer, dear one. It's because I have not seen your suffering. I have not understood your suffering. It's not my intention to make you suffer. It's not my intention to destroy you as a person, as a culture, as a religion. It's just because I have not understood your difficulties and your suffering. So I need help. Could you tell me what is in your heart, your difficulties, your suffering, so that I will understand better and I will not react like I have before? If you do not help me, who will? So that is the kind of speech that we can use when there is compassion in our heart, and that will change the whole situation. The other person will open his heart and her heart and tell you the truth. And then you have a chance to practice compassionate listening. Compassionate listening is a kind of practice that has the power to heal yourself and heal the other person. Compassionate listening is the kind of listening that is conducted with mindfulness of suffering. Mindfulness of suffering means you are aware that there is suffering in him or in her or in them. And listening like this, you have only one purpose: to allow them a chance to speak out, so that they can suffer less. If during the time you listen, you keep that kind of awareness alive, then you are protected. What the other person said will not touch off anger, irritation in you, because you are protected by compassion. Even if his speech is full of wrong perception, full of accusation, anger, blames, you can still continue to listen with compassion because you are protected by the energy of compassion just because you know how to preserve that kind of awareness. I listen to him with only one purpose. That is to help him to have a chance to speak out and suffer less. I listen to them with only one purpose, to give them a chance to speak out and suffer less. Therefore, even if he has a lot of wrong perceptions, he has a lot of anger, I still continue to listen. I will not interrupt him or her or them. Maybe later on, in a few days, I will have a chance to offer him or them some information so that they will correct their perceptions. But not now. Now it's only compassionate listening. And listen like that for 1 hour is very healing. Whether that person is our partner, our son, our daughter, our father, or our colleague, or even another group, even if they are terrorists. When the event of September 11 happened, I was in America. That event took place only 5 days after the publication of my book, Anger. And the whole country of America was overwhelmed by the feeling of fear and anger. And I think acting on the basis of fear and anger is very dangerous. I was scheduled to speak in Berkeley for 4,000 people. And what I did that day is to conduct a session of breathing in and out to calm the emotion of fear and anger. And then I propose that we have to keep our calm and start that kind of deep listening. I propose this. I propose that America will organize sessions of deep listening. And they can address the people they think to be the enemies and say something like this. Dear people over there, you have done such an awful thing to us. You must be very angry. You must have been very angry. You must have been you must have suffered a lot to have done such a thing to us. We do not know why you have done such a thing to us. Have we done anything to make you that angry? Have we tried to destroy you as a people, as a religion, as a culture? It's not our intention to do that. Maybe we have done something. Maybe we have said something that gave you the impression that we want to destroy you as a people, as a culture, as a religion, but in fact, we do not have that intention. We might be unskillful in what we have said or done in the past, but so please tell us. We will listen to you with all our heart. And if we have committed some unskillfulness, we will apologize. Tell us. So we can organize sessions of listening like that, invite the people in our society, people who are considered as wise, spiritual in the spiritual traditions and otherwise, and then we might televise that kind of sessions of deep listening and love and speech in order for the whole nation to follow. And this practice of deep listening and love and speech can be healing and can remove the fear and the anger and make us, put us in a much safer condition. You know that the war of Iraq was started with that feeling of fear and anger. And many millions of human lives were destroyed just by that. And that is why it's very important that we practice so that we can understand our own suffering. We can see the suffering of other person, that we can start dialogue with the practice of deep listening and loving speech, that we can restore communication and begin the process of healing. In Plum Village, we have France where we live and practice. We have sponsored sessions of practice, inviting the groups of Palestinians and Israelis to come and practice with us. We support them in their practice. When they first come, both groups has a lot of anger and fear and suspicion and strong emotion. So the practice of the first week is to just help them to walk, to breathe, to sit in such a way that can calm down their feeling, their emotion. And then for the second week, we started, initiated them into the practice of deep listening, compassionate listening. Each group is requested to use loving speech and tell the other group about their suffering endured by the children and the adult. You have to tell us everything about your own suffering and difficulties. And the other group is using deep listening, compassionate listening, mindfulness of compassion in order to listen. And the outcome is that this group, while listening, realize for the first time that on the other group, they have suffered almost exactly the same kind of suffering that we have. Children and adults. And they begin to see the other group as human beings. And they can, for the first time, look at them with the eyes of compassion. They suffer less, and the other group suffer less also. They know that there are wrong perceptions on both parts. But that kind of dialogue helps us very much to recognize their wrong perceptions and our own wrong perceptions. And we have plenty of time in order to offer each other later on information in order to help each other remove wrong perceptions and the healing take place. And both groups begin to share a meal in mindfulness, do walking meditation together, holding hands, and brotherhood, sisterhood become possible with understanding and compassion, understanding of the suffering. And they always come together at the end as one group and report to us about the success of their practice. They always